Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session, AI in Tax Practice 2026, presented by Praxio AI in collaboration with the Tax Institute. Thank you all for subscribing, and for those who submitted their questions. We will try to address some of those questions today as we go through the slides, and feel free to put in more questions, which we'll cover off at the end of the session. This is a CPD session for those Tax Institute members, and what we aim to do today is to provide a good practical framework on how to use AI safely and efficiently for tax practice. We'll aim to give some tips, frameworks tips, and also some resources at the end that you can look up after we send the presentation to you after this session. After the session, we will be sending the slides as well as a recording of today's webinar so that you can refer back to it as you wish. So to get started, we want to talk about why AI matters. So AI is now no longer just a buzzword. It's no longer something that we just talk about, but it's really now ingrained in our lives. AI is here to stay. It's out of the bottle. It's here to stay, out of the genie bottle. There's a couple of kind of government initiatives and other things that help to bring AI to life. So, for example, the government introduced the National AI Plan in December 25. There's a whole lot of other government principles or guidance that helps us to guide how we use AI. And in the market, as I walk around talking to people, I do hear AI now becoming a more prominent discussions, from boardrooms down to implementation and managing effective teams. So now it's no longer about whether we should use AI. It's more about how we should use AI and how do we use it safely, consistently, and incorporating our professional judgment as a profession. The other thing to kind of bear in mind is your clients are probably using AI, and they'll come up into a meeting with you and they'll have AI generated information that they want to talk to you about. So with this in mind, and then thinking about the pace of change, the complexity in tax rules, we really need to think about how we use AI in our workflow and efficiency, and thinking about our staff as well. Because the other thing that we're seeing is clients wanting faster answers, they want quicker advice, better advice, and they're also using AI. One of the questions I get asked very often is, hey, will AI replace our jobs? And I think to answer that question, part of it is, what do we do as human beings? In the resources in the slide track that was sent there, I've included a TED Talk, a YouTube video, which is TED Talk, which talks about what humans should do when we're using AI. And it comes down to us humans maintaining that critical thinking, the decision-making, and the creativity. AI is here to help us with our job, but it's not here to replace us. It's that we remain accountable for what we decide. We remain accountable for what we advise clients. And so AI is supposed to be here as our companion, but not here to replace us. And if you think about all the principles and frameworks we'll talk about today, accountability, as well as human in the loop, that is all ingrained in our principles and frameworks. So it's all about us understanding what we do. And AI is here to help us to master our trades. But we are the ones that actually need to master and know our trades well for AI to be most efficient to help us. So the other thing that we should consider about is, how do we train juniors and new career entrants? And how do we as human beings develop them and use AI to help them with that journey? So I just want to talk a bit about what happens when AI goes wrong. So I've cited a few examples here. So the first example is a lawyer who lost their license because he used AI-generated cases in his evidence in court. The citations were incorrect. Those cases actually didn't exist, and the court threw out the case and also banned the lawyer. Another one is a Big Four firm did a government report did a report to the government, and they used AI to do it, and there were errors in the report, and they ended up having to refund back the fees to the government. Another one about AI not working well is one of the Big Four banks wanted to use AI to create a call center. They rolled it out, and after a few months realized it wasn't doing the right job. They had to roll it back and reintroduce humans into the call centers. The courts around Australia have got guidance in place or rules in place that expert witnesses, for example, are not allowed to use AI to generate their reports. And then I just left a snippet here from the AFR, which is only on the 12th of August, so very recent, where the court threw out a case because the person in witness box was using AI to coach them. So these examples are not here to scare people away from AI, but what it does show is what happens if the controls, the governance are not there. And we need to, as an organization or as an industry, make sure that we don't over-rely on AI. We need to review things properly, make sure the sources or information that's used to generate the output is actually genuinely correct. And we'll talk a little bit about that because we've had questions about how do we make sure sources of information are correct as it comes out of AI. So this is just once again reiterating that we cannot outsource our accountability to AI. We need to own it. So what does responsible AI look like in 2026? Now, at the moment, there are a number of resources that we as a profession can use, and they're ingrained in both government-produced principles as well as our own profession produced guidances. Now, the responsible use of AI is already ingrained in our professional and ethical standards, right? But there are some resources we can use to think about how to develop a better framework, or better principles. So here we've got a few that are from the Department of Industry, Science and Resources. So they've got the Australia AI Ethics Principles and also the Voluntary AI Safety Standards, which includes some guardrails. We've also got the National AI Centre, which has published a guidance for AI adoption that we can have a look at as well. And then, of course, the Tax Practitioners Board has issued a conduct or a guidance statement for how we use AI. So it's not that we're not allowed to use AI, it's how do we actually use it responsibly. Now, what I thought I would articulate is within all these principles and standards that we can rely upon, what does it mean for us as tax practitioners? And I think what it means for us is a few things. Number one is accountability stays with us as the practitioner. We have an obligation of confidentiality to protect sensitive information. We have a duty of care when we do research or provide advice to clients. And the consideration would be in the work that we do, what is the risk? The higher the risk, the stronger the compliance or the governance or the review process needs to be implemented. And then always maintaining that human oversight, that human element. We are the decision makers. We're the ones that are accountable. And leading to helping us frame all of this would be setting some guardrails or a framework for us when we implement AI. So next, I want to talk a little bit about some of the AI guardrails or things that we could consider. Now, AI governance doesn't need to start with a 50-page policy. We've all got different businesses and different ways that we work. So it's one of the things that we suggest is progressive. So you start with, I've just done a simple kind of 6-step process here. And first one is you maintain a register of things that you use AI for. Number 2 is you define what in your organization, what cases or what use cases you allow the use of AI, and what use cases you say you cannot use AI for. Then you set the data handling. How do you handle data? How's the data put into AI? And how do you then take the output that comes out of it? Review and iteration and managing risk is probably another element that's really important. So in setting your guardrail, your framework, you need to be fairly thoughtful about how does the user using AI, how do they review the output that comes out? How do they continually input into the AI for it to be more customized and to be more accurate? And we often say to people, using AI is not a one-shot question, one-shot answer process. It is a process of iteration. You put in the information, review the output, challenge that output, put in more information or more guidance, and then let the AI continue to help you develop the best, most customized response or answer for your circumstance. So that's all very important in terms of how we develop the use case for AI. Then number 6 kind of guardrail we've got in here is monitoring improve. So you don't set the policy or the framework and that's it and leave it in a drawer. It's an iteration process where you trial and error, you try the different methodologies, see what works, what doesn't work, and you go back and improve this policy and you add to it over time, depending on your use cases as well. Because when you start using AI, you might start with the less risky work processes, which then would have less risk, less review potentially, and different review processes. As you move to more complicated matters and more riskier matters, your process for allowing the AI to be used and how to review and assess them will also change. So next, we want to share kind of like a 6-question framework for developing your AI process. And, this is supposed to be just a starting point, and each of your organization, you'll have kind of different ways of doing it or different customization. But we would start with, what is the task I'm using AI for? Is it a task that is relatively simple, such as summarizing documents or drafting simple email responses, or it could be preparing generic communication to clients or some policies or checklists, which is very generic? Or is it you're analyzing specific client scenarios and producing advisory to them? So you're going to think about, first of all, what's the task? Next is we would say, what is the risk associated with this task? I.e., what if I get it wrong? Does getting it wrong, could it mean that my tax license or my professional indemnity could be a risk? Or is it, oh, okay, it's very generic, I might not have summarized this document properly. So you need to kind of think about what is the risk if it goes wrong. Then understanding the risk, you would then help to develop, how do I use the AI to mitigate my risk? Next, we think about what information am I entering into the AI? Do we need to sanitize the information, take out all this client-sensitive data? Is what I'm entering into the AI enough, or do I need to give it more? And this is an iterative process as well. So you may enter the information first, get an output and say, hey, that's actually not enough information, I need to put in more. So it's not a one-shot answer. Once we've entered in the information and the AI has put out its first output, we should treat this as a draft. The AI is not supposed to produce for us the final answer or final result the first time around. It is good at producing a draft, and you treat it as an assistant or a consultant. Now, as part of getting your answer, you may also want to review the sources that the AI has used to produce the first answer. And one thing you can do when you're prompting or instructing the AI is say, please provide me links to all the sources that you've used to generate your answer. And what you can do then when it does that is you can actually click in those links and make sure that A, those resources or sources links actually exist, and B, you can actually read it and say, hey, is this right or wrong? Is this relevant, not relevant? The other thing that you can also think about doing is how do you limit the type of data that the AI uses to generate its output? Now, once you've done that, you might look at the answer and re-prompt or re-enter information into the AI for it to continue to help you with your task. And the next thing after we've done that is what to think about who actually reviews the output. Now, that once again depends on the task at hand. If it's a less risky task, more general task, you might say the person who's using the AI can review it and that's okay. But for something that's more complicated, such as advisory to clients, you might say, hey, the manager or it has to be escalated to someone to do a peer review or review it. It is no different to, at the moment in many tax practices, there will be a person providing or drafting the advice, and it will go to a manager or a partner to review that piece of advice before it actually goes out to the client. So this is fairly similar in terms of how we should build out our framework. Then last but not least is evidence. We need to ensure that we keep evidence of how we generated the output, whether it comes from AI or not. We are very commonly used to having work papers, having evidence to support what output came from our task, whether it's using AI or not. So putting this into perspective in terms of a tax workflow, we first of all want to move from AI gave me an answer to I know the answer is correct. I have checked it and is reviewed and supported, and therefore I'm happy to use this output. And here I've kind of developed kind of a 7-step process for specifically a kind of tax workflow. First is we've got to classify the task. What's the scenario or what are we using it for? We've got to choose the right tool, which AI tool or what do we use? We think about, do we need to redact, sanitize client-sensitive information? And then we look at what facts and assumptions we're providing. We get the first output and we check the sources and the reasoning. And how do we challenge that to make sure that is our expertise that is being fed into the AI to give us the best result. There's a human review element that goes into this before we can actually rely on it. One question I do get asked quite a lot is, hey, Will, my clients are using AI and I'm using AI. What's the difference? And I often say to people is, your clients using AI does not have the expertise in tax that you would. So when the output comes out from the AI, they don't know how to question it or challenge it in the way that you can do it. And that's why AI is very good for helping those that have already mastered their trade and experts in what they do. It's just here to help you research, compile quicker. So if you use some of this kind of framework and you kind of do this human review iterative process, then the AI is probably going to be more supportive in terms of how we get the best out of it. And last but not least is we need to document, make sure that we have proof of how we use AI to support us getting the answer and making sure that we understand it. Next, I want to just talk about more generically, what is the best way of prompting AI? And when we say prompting AI is really, how do we give the AI the instructions or how do we converse with the AI to assist us? Once again, we should treat AI like a junior assistant or a companion where we've got to talk to it and get it to help us and get it to do our work through supervision and not just give it one instruction and say, hey, that's good enough. So what I've done here is I've kind of talked a bit about different things that we can consider when giving instruction or prompting AI. So the first thing we should do is give the AI the context. What task are we doing? What is the background to that scenario or the task we're trying to do? Number two is give it a persona. What is the AI role? Is it acting as a tax advisor? Is it acting as a business advisor or something else? So if you are deliberate in terms of how you tell the AI, hey, this is the role that you're assuming, the AI then knows to pivot into customizing to that persona. Then the next is the specific task. What are we doing? Are we analyzing a set of financial statements? Are we looking at, doing some market analysis? Are we trying to do a checklist or prepare a checklist based on a document and creating summaries? What is that task? Then the next is give it the facts. What are the facts of the case or the facts of the scenario we want to feed into it? And that can come from not just one round of providing relevant facts. It could be coming back with providing more facts or more changes once we've seen the first output. Then the next step is once we get the output, we review it. We review what comes out and we challenge the source of information, the thinking behind what the AI has done, so that we can develop the AI's thinking to be our thinking. So it's us controlling the AI, us doing the thinking, not the AI doing the thinking. Then next is we can then review our instructions, our output, iterate, challenge the output, and get it to continually update. So in practice, most of our clients that use our product, for example, would be prompting the product 3 to 5 times before they get to a more customized answer for their scenario. And that's similar to if you were using a general AI, it generally takes 3 to 8 times kind of re-prompting for you to start getting comfortable with the output. The AI, though, is very good at providing a first draft or drafts. And as we all know, it's probably quicker and easier to review a draft rather than writing it from scratch. So that's kind of fairly important. And as I was talking about before about source of information, what is important is that you can sometimes, when you're doing research, for example, you can instruct the AI to say, I only want government-specific data or ABS data or something like that. So you know that the output that comes out, the citations, the references, and the data source you uses are more credible. But once again, it's our professional judgment. We need to check it. We need to review it. So in the next one, I just want to give you 2 examples of a vague prompt versus a better prompt. And this is in the context of, let's say we want to do some financial analysis of our clients' financial statements to see, what we can do to help them as a business advisor. So one prompt could be, the simple would be, review this financial report and give me advice. Versus a better prompt would be instructing it that, hey, you are a business advisor, review the profit and loss and balance sheet for this type of entity, and I want you to focus on these items. Help me to provide discussion points that I can look at and help to advise the client. So this is a lot more detailed, descriptive, but you don't have to write a whole page, but you can write in terms of having it well structured, and you can add to that as you move along as well to develop the piece of work. And once again, your instructions to the AI will change depending on the task and the risk associated with that task. So tax work, for example, would probably require, more descriptive instructions versus if it was a simple task. So I hope that kind of gives you a good idea of AI, the frameworks, and how we can develop that as we move along and as we develop AI or roll up AI into our organizations. Next, what I'd like to kind of talk about is AI tools. So for tax work specifically, Praxio AI, we developed a tax assistant specifically for tax research. And the reason we did this was we interviewed a lot of accounting firms to talk about where the pain points were in their kind of tax research and tax flow. And a lot of the tax practitioners came back to us and said, look, research takes quite a long time. The rules are very complicated. After research, we need to draft the advice to the client, which also takes a long time. There is lack of staff, and it's eating into our profit margins, and we have a lot of write-offs or unchargeable times. And sometimes it's quite complicated and it's very stressful. So we thought about that and said, what can we do to help tax practitioners? And so we said to ourselves, well, okay, what we're looking to do is to give practitioners more time back in their day, help them to reduce write-off and rework, help them to turn around advice faster, and hopefully give them more time for doing higher value work, increase their margins. So that's the rationale of why we went down the journey of developing a tax-specific research tool to help practitioners. What I might do now is pass it on to Ken to talk about how our product is different from generic AI. Over to you, Ken.
Thanks, Will. So when we set out to develop the product a year ago, we did look at the landscape, including the foundational models, and we would pose tax scenarios to the AI, and it would inevitably get it wrong. Now, a year on, AI has gotten a lot better, the general AI, right? So just before this meeting, my wife actually pinged me as I was preparing for this presentation, and she says, ChatGPT is down. And I said, oh, what do you mean down? We're doing some renovations at the moment, and she's like going to ChatGPT and just trying to figure out what tiles that she should be implementing. And ChatGPT is very good at general AI stuff, right? So the easiest way of thinking about Praxio is that we're not trying to replace general AI. General AI is extremely capable at the moment, and it's designed to answer almost everything. So when we set out to build Praxio, we wanted to make sure that it's very specific and vertical to Australian tax work. So we grounded our research that the AI, based on curated legislation and ATO sources, and we built the workflow around how a tax professional would actually approach the matter. Understanding the facts, asking clarifying questions, researching relevant laws, and then producing answers and citations in a review trial. So a user that is very adept at ChatGPT can potentially, using the prompts that Will mentioned earlier, to actually guide the AI through the process and get it to exactly the customized answer he wants. But rather than doing that, we've basically built a product around doing it all for them and in a consistent manner for every tax scenario. So in this table, you say the general AI on the left, it's a general assistant. You need to prompt it every time. You may or may not get consistent answers every scenario you put in. We build a product around consistency, that it's based on consistent set of corpus of Australian updated legislation and ATO references. The prompt is consistent every time. It comes back with clarifying questions so the user can actually add specific context and detail to it. It does the research in a consistent way, and it provides the citations in a consistent manner. So I'll hand over back to Will to give you a brief demo of our system.
Hi, I'm back. So just in case people want to ask questions, so you could either use the chat box, which is on the bottom right. It's got like a little bubble and a square. Or if you click the 9 dots, in those 9 dots, there's also, it says Q&A, ask a question. So you can ask questions there if you like as well. And we will attend to the questions at the end of the session. While I'm setting up to do the demo, what I might do is I'm going to launch a poll to see, which you will see on the top right of your screen. You should see it says new poll is live. If you click on the poll, it should ask question. Hopefully, if it works. Yeah, so the poll just simply asks, what type of AI do you currently use for tax research? And there are 3 options there. So feel free to click onto that poll while I switch screens and set up for the demo. So hopefully it's now moved to my screen here. So as Ken said, we developed our tax research tool in a way that it thinks like a tax professional. So what I'll do is, this is the front screen. And if we put in a scenario, so our app has the ability to redact, meaning that it will search for any confidential or sensitive information before it feeds the scenario into our processing. The sensitive information is not kept by us, so it will redact it before it actually gets sent to us. So you see in this scenario that I put on screen, I put in Bobby Brown, the date, and I've also put in a date in here for the date of acquisition of a house. Now, our system is smart enough to identify which are sensitive information and which dates are actually required for the research. So if I run this now, the first thing it will do is it will look for sensitive information and it will redact it. So you see this is redacted out, and the user gets to check this first before it actually gets pushed into the system to do research. So you see that it's taken out the name, it's taken out the date of birth, but it's retained the 1 July 2013 for the acquisition date, because that's important for running the scenario. So if we hit run now, what it'll do is it will send it for research. So on the left-hand side here will be all the previous chats. So you can always go back to your previous chats and keep working on them. And you will see now that it's fetching legislation ATO. As Ken said, our system is designed in a way that we actually built our own database, and the database only uses federal legislation and ATO guidance. So it doesn't use anything else. So that's where it's different to general AI as well, because we only lock it to data sources that we can rely on, which is legislation and ATO. If you can see, then you took about 20 seconds for it to come up with the first answer, and you'll see that you've got the scenario there. You've got the research where you come up with a summary of the advice, what the legislation or what it utilized, the analysis notes, and then what it recommends, as well as where the risks are. It also comes on the side here, on the right-hand side, a list of questions. So the way we've designed the product is that it will come up with the first draft, but it will come back with additional questions or information that the system thinks it would need to improve that research. And this has been a very talked about feature of our product because it helps the user doing the research work think about things that they may have missed or think a bit more differently and potentially have to go back to clients to ask more information. Here is where all the citations are. And if you click here, it'll go straight to the legislation and what the provision actually says. And or if it's from the ATO, you click it, it will go straight to the ATO website. So this is a way that the user can prove up the resources, prove up where the information comes from, and have the human review element that goes into it. So in here, you can further add information or you can answer the questions. So let's say we say no, say we answer it and we ask it to rerun, and then it will just rerun. So the other good features that we have in our product is there is this share option here, where if you've got more than one user or in your organization, you could actually share this with somebody else for better team collaboration, or you could share this with your manager so they can review it and add to it and improve the research and then send it back to you. So you can send it to each other and improve the research. So this is very good for team collaboration or sharing for reviews. And now it's rerun it again. And what it does, it will keep the research, the most recent research up the top, and the older research will be at the bottom. And also you can see what instructions were given to it. We then also, once you're comfortable with the research, we have this client drafting tool. So it will come up with a client draft that you can edit. You can ask it to, draft it differently. Draft simpler summary. And it will continue to redraft it for you as well. And once you're happy with the draft or the output, you can then either copy and paste it onto somewhere, or you could export it out to PDF or Word or email. So that's a very useful tool for drafting, and it saves a lot of our clients' time because they can have the draft ready that they can then fine tune and send out to their clients. We also then have this export tool here, which we can export to PDF, Word, or email. And in here, we can provide a full research. So this is really good for people who want to use it for work papers. So you can file and say, this is how many times I iterated, here's the things that I put in to come up with the research. So that's very good for tax practitioners, and it was built specifically for that work paper and that evidence piece. So that's kind of high level how the product works and what it does. We also aim to update our database quarterly, because one of the questions asked was, with the ever-changing landscape and so much new legislation and changing all the time, how do we manage that? And we will rebuild our database and update it on a quarterly basis to take into account each new changes in law or guidance, for example. So that's a very high level of what our product does. And what I might do is I'll pass back to Ken to talk about our roadmap and the more technical part.
Okay. Yeah, well, can you flick over to the slide, please? Um, can't see. Oh, okay. If you move over to the next slide, please. Okay, so a big part of Praxio is really our initial focus was obviously what we'll mention is providing accurate research, right? But we recognize that from our users' feedback, accuracy alone is not enough, right? So for professional firms, you also need controls around how AI is used, right? Like Will mentioned earlier, right? So things like having the citations and the source transparency, clarifying questions, having an audit trail of where the research is coming from and what additional context has been provided is super important, right? And so we also want to make sure, practitioners are in control of the final answer, right? What Will mentioned earlier about sharing the research to another colleague and having them validate or provide additional information, which is this share chat feature that we just launched about 6 weeks ago. We've actually seen a lot of engagement and usage with our feature. Like firms are actually sending tax scenarios of the customers back and forth and adding to it and keeping an audit trail of it, right? So we were quite surprised, actually. We launched it. It's totally different from how you would see in general ChatGPT and chat, but actually sharing research back and forth and keeping an audit trail. So we pleasantly surprised that was very useful. So we're going to continue to see how we can add additional collaboration sort of features to it, right? And so I talked about focus, talked about control. On our roadmap, we're soon to be launching next month where you don't even have to even sign into the app, right? You can actually send your tax scenario directly to Praxio and it would actually do all the processing, all of the research in the background. And it will actually then email you back when it's ready and you can just sign in and you can see the research after you sign in. We're also adding the feature where you can upload and analyze documents. Again, we wanted to make sure the experience is similar to ChatGPT, but also take a step forward, right? So our redact feature is also incorporated into the upload and analyze documents. So Will showed you where you type in a scenario and it will actually redact all the PII information. We're also doing that to any documents that you've attached into the scenario. In addition, we want to also go deep. We've heard users that in addition to legislation and ATO guidance and references that, hey, we want to also reference relevant case law that is related to that tax scenario. So we can incorporate that into our advice. So coming soon will be case law support, where the user will be able to see basically on the home screen, click a button and be able to see relevant case law from OSLI, which is what we're hearing from users the website where they try and reference case law that's related to the tax scenario and bring that in an automated way into our product. And we're also looking at, again, additional workflow enhancements like integrating with Xero, etc., to just further streamline our users' workflows. Okay, that's our roadmap. Back to you, Will.
Thank you, Ken. So what we hope that you got out of today is a bit about how to get started using AI if you're not already using it, or you're already using it, what kind of tips that might have come out today you can implement. And we think that getting started with AI in your firm could start with picking low risk item workflows, set the rules around them, develop how you want to use the AI, review the outputs, work it collaboratively within the team, and develop the best process that works for you. Firms will benefit from using AI not because they use a whole lot of tools, but it's using the right tools in a clear way and having good habits and governance around how it's used. And so we hope that after today, you could either start using AI or implement some tip that came out of today. So next step, I guess, for you guys would be, think about what came out today, develop a good framework, implement more guidelines or guardrails of how you may want to use AI going forward, and trial different AI tools that might help you. And for tax research, maybe you can try Praxio AI Tax Assistant to see how it's different from using general AI and how we've developed it specifically for helping tax professionals. And last but not least, this is, we'll send this out, but here's links to some resources that you could use if you haven't already implemented AI. Some of these resources will be helpful for you developing your framework going forward. And I think that was pretty much, we're on time. We haven't had that many questions come in, and I've addressed a lot of the questions that came in when people subscribed. So that's really good, and I hope that today's session has been useful. I want to thank everybody for attending today's session. So my name's William. I'm one of the founders of Praxio AI. More in terms of commercial, I'm an accountant by background and tax advisor back in the day. And Ken is also one of the founders of Praxio AI. Ken is the tech lead and responsible for the development of the product, and we work very closely together. Part of our journey is we have been very close with talking with accounting practices, finding out what they really want, and we really value feedback in terms of how we improve our product going forward. And where we're a little bit interesting is Ken attends 80% of the calls with the accounting practices that we interview, so he can understand what they are looking for. And I attend 80% of the technology calls, so I can understand how to translate commercial into tech, into coding, and how does it come out. So once again, thank you very much for your time today. I hope today has been useful, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about our product or about AI. We will be sending out the presentation along with a recording of today's session. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.